Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, a wonderful day to talk about all the short form literature that I have found. Today I want to talk about a short story about love and the irresistible power of it. From an author that I've talked about before. I am referring to The Merry Month of May by O. Henry. For those who don't know, and I'm sure a lot of people know who O. Henry is, he's talked about in high school classes all across America. I don't know about outside of America, but he's pretty well regarded there. But O. Henry, otherwise known as William Porter, was a writer who frequently wrote short stories. He wrote hundreds of them. He mainly wrote them in the latter half of his life. In the front half, he was more focused on being a banker, and as it turns out, he embezzled money, which I think I noted in the Gift of the Magi video that I did. Go check out that video if you want a more detailed summary of who O. Henry was. But yeah, he did embezzlement, ran away to Honduras, came back, served his time, and started writing. And he was a big fan of writing, surprise endings, like how in The Gift of the Magi. I'm not spoiling anything here. Like in The Gift of the Magi, these two lovers buy each other gifts, and then it turns out that they had sacrificed the very thing that would have made the gift useful in the first place, but that still brings them closer together. So a pretty interesting and well-regarded author. Without further ado, let's get to this short story. I'll do a brief summary, a little bit of an analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Merry Month of May begins with an introduction where the narrator talks about the power of love and the power of May, and how Cupid, you can't really resist Cupid no matter how hard you try, and Cupid is not non-discriminating. Like, he makes millionaires fall in love with stenographers, so you can't really escape the power of love. The primary focus of this story is Mr. Coulson, a disabled man living with some attendants, including Higgins, who is not really seen in this story and is off doing who knows what, as well as Mrs. Widdop. I believe she is a widower who has gotten pretty close to Mr. Coulson over time. It appears that the power of love and the springtime in general has gotten to Mr. Coulson, because he starts talking about how he is close to Mrs. Widdop and he's about to propose to her when his sister, Mrs. Van Meter Constantine Coulson, it's a weird, unusual name, but she shows up, and she senses that Mr. Coulson is about to propose, so she sets about disrupting it. The narrator describes her as kind of cold and an ice queen, if you will, and she doesn't want Mr. Coulson falling in love, either because of the embarrassment of falling in love with your attendee, or maybe because she doesn't believe in love in general. But she develops a plan. Essentially, she contacts the Iceman, who brings in a bunch of ice, and she tells him to store it in the basement. And what that is it cools down the house, thus getting rid of the presence of spring. Mr. Coulson gets a little bit angrier and a little bit more agitated, even going so far as chewing Mrs. Widdop out when she asked him to elaborate on what he was talking about the day before when he was going to propose to her. And he's just like, why are you talking about springtime and love when it's so cold in this house? Get me a coat. And so Mrs. Widdop leaves for the day, but the very next day, Mrs. Widdop shows up and is like, I found a whole bunch of ice in the basement and I got rid of that. And Mr. Coulson is back to his springtime in love kind of mood, and he ends up actually proposing to Mrs. Widdop. And then there's the question of like, oh, well, what happened to his sister? Where did she go, and why isn't she trying to stop this? And Mrs. Widdop reveals that the sister actually ran off with the Iceman. As it turns out, she too couldn't avoid the power of love. In terms of analysis, this is a pretty short but very fun short story to read. It's pretty simple in terms of what O. Henry is trying to say, because the main theme, the overarching idea of this story is that love is powerful and irresistible, especially in the springtime as the flowers bloom and new life is brought into the world. The introduction, pretty much lays this out for us. Allow me to read you a quote from this. In May, Cupid shoots blindfolded. Millionaires marry stenographers. Wise professors woo white-aproned gum chewers behind quick lunch counters. School moms make big bad boys remain after school. Lads with ladders steal lightly over lawns where Juliet waits in her trellised window with her telescope packed. Young couples out for a walk come home married. Old chaps put on white spats and promenade near the normal school. Even married men, grown unwontedly tender and sentimental, whack their spouses on the back and growl, "How goes it, old girl?" And all of that it's pretty funny and kind of dated. Talking about all these sorts of things. But the point is that, love makes us act in ways that we weren't normally going to act. It changes us in, a variety of ways. And if you try to resist it, that's not going to work out so well for you. It's enough. Love is powerful enough to make a mean old man like Mr. Coulson change and see, someone who's been around him for a while, like Mrs. Widdop, like it makes him fall in love with her. So already in the story you see the power of love, but you also see how it can't be resisted, because in the story the sister's like, oh, I don't want my brother to fall in love with his attendee, with his housekeeper, so I'm going to try to change things. And she tries to fill the house with ice, which is a bit ridiculous, but again, I guess that's getting at the fact that to make somebody not fall in love, to try to resist nature, you're going to have to do something extremely bizarre like that. But as we find out in the end of the story, like, not only does it not work for the sister, but she can't resist it even as a proverbial, ice queen. She's she ends up falling in love with the Iceman and runs off with him. So, the power of spring, the power of love, this large force, it manages to grab onto her too. So nobody is immune, no matter how much they say they are, to the power of love. Another fun thing about this story is how it's presented in a sort of documentary style. O. Henry kind of writes his story as though we're like an alien species viewing Earth, and he's like, look at what happens during the springtime. Look at how everyone is falling in love. Let us look at a case here and see what happens. And as you can see, the sister is trying to, put up a fight and make sure that nobody falls in love. But that does not work out for her. So I really like that documentary style. It does come off as a bit weird at times when O. Henry uses, just large words, without really needing to use those. But I still think it's pretty fun. And also, related to this is the ending. O. Henry is known for his surprise endings, as I was talking about what happened in The Gift of the Magi before, but you see the surprise ending here too. Not only does Mrs. Widdop and Mr. Coulson fall in love, but we also find out that the sister and the Iceman ran off, and I think that's absolutely funny. It made me, I couldn't stop laughing for a bit. So I will say O. Henry, succeeded with his surprise ending by not only, surprising me, but also giving me a laugh in the process. So I got to give O. Henry some credit for that. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the merry month of May by by O. Henry, a really wonderful short story, and one that is worth checking out even if you know the twist ending. Like O. Henry's writing and how the ending comes about is very fun to read. And so I'm going to link to it in the description because it has entered the public domain. If you read it before, or you read it now, or you just simply want to comment on something I said here, feel free to do so below. Let's have a discussion about the power of love. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about O. Henry if they do not already know about him. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird travels. Try not to resist the power of love.